Howdy, folks. Today we're talking about creative lighting and how you can improve your own lighting skills with the Dark Lord of studio lighting himself, right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Lutz. And before we get started, I've got one thing to ask of you. Over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are actually not subscribed to this channel. Come on, folks, let's change that. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps me get even more cool guests on the show. It's just one click. That's all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's welcome today's special guest, the master of color, the legend of studio lighting, Jake Hicks. Jake, man, good to have you back on the show.
How you doing? Yeah, thank you. I know, back on. I know it's been a couple of years, few years maybe, but yeah, no, it's good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, it's crazy. It doesn't seem like that long ago. It's nuts.
It really doesn't. Yeah, I know we were kind of talking before we hit record there, and yeah, I think you said it was like 3 or 4 years. I was like, that's crazy. Yeah,
that's nuts because we were still, I think, at the depth of the pandemic at that point.
We were. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Good times.
So yeah, I know, right? I've introduced you as like the Dark Lord of studio lighting, which is actually not really quite correct because you should be the colorful god of studio lighting gel color. How are things going with you? What have you been up to over the last couple of years since we last spoke?
Yeah, I mean, Dark Lord. Yeah, I mean, that's a new one. At least that is a new one. I'll take it. Yeah, it's been good, man. It's been good the last since we spoke. So definitely when we spoke 2 or 3 years ago, whenever it was, I was shooting all flash, right? So strobes, and now I'm pretty much exclusively shooting LEDs. So like you ask about like some of the like what the biggest change since we last spoke. That is undoubtedly the biggest change for me. Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting. It has been interesting. It's not a like for like, changing from flash to strobe, from flash to LED, which is, especially with the work that I do, which is a little bit more involved. The lighting has to be a bit more precise and that sort of thing. It's not just a case of I'll just buy 6 tubes and off I go. Which if you're a cinematographer, you could do very, very well with that. But I need sort of more variety in terms of light shaping and that sort of thing. So it's been interesting, yeah. But it's been fun, yeah. It's been fun.
That's a really interesting aspect. And I remember, for those of you who are watching or listening to this episode, if you cast your mind back to last week's episode where we went through some predictions for 2025, I read out your response, and you mentioned the sort of the progress or the developments in the world of LED lighting. And to me, that's interesting because what you are historically known for is your amazing color and your gel lighting. And of course, in my mind, that's always been strobes with color gels. But now that you're using LEDs, it makes perfect sense because you can change the color of LEDs to any color you want. Does that really make your work a lot easier, or are there any limitations in that?
So, like I said, it hasn't been like for like. And I think one of the biggest things that I've kind of learned, whilst kind of going through this, I mean, let's just take LED panels as one example, right? Which is what a lot of people, especially earlier on when they were playing with LEDs, were kind of used to. And what an LED panel is, long story short, it is, let's just call it like 500 little lights in a circle or a square, or whatever it is, right? Spread out over let's just say 12-inch by 12-inch, right? But you have essentially now you have 500 little lights as opposed to one big light, which is what a flash typically is, right? Strobe. So many of us, when we're learning photography and how light works, we're kind of brought up on the inverse square law principle, right? Whereas light, drops off proportional to the distance and that sort of thing, yada, yada, yada. But basically meaning that it's a fixed rate. Light drops off at a fixed rate. Now, that principle is based on a single point of light. In reality, it's actually very, very vague. It doesn't really translate specifically to a studio because of bounce light and that sort of thing, but it's a good general rule of thumb, right? Now, what happens when we start to use LED panels, for example, is the inverse square law no longer applies because it's no longer a single point of light, right? So now you have what we have, like what I refer to as like this mini wall of light, right? So there are a lot of benefits to that because light will drop off in a very even way. And if you bring it in quite close, this mini wall of light will drop off very, very quickly. So you can get a lot of kind of shaping and depth with LED panels that were typically very difficult to get with strobes. One of the biggest reasons for that, again, is that strobes need a modifier, right? Compared to an LED panel. So you can bring an LED panel in like 4 inches away from somebody's face, and you don't need to worry about the modifier because it is the modifier. So again, there are lots of things there. So wasn't this like for like journey for me in terms of, okay, cool, now I can just switch to millions of colors as opposed to like 24 colors, which is the gel sheets that you're kind of referring to. It was this kind of relearning of how light works, because it is like foundational learning of the inverse square law is like that's ingrained in us. And I was kind of surprised at how ingrained it was in me. I've been doing this like over 25 years, and you instinctively move a light. I do instinctively move a light, and I know, okay, that's going to drop off like half a stop. Boom, move that back. Cool. That means that the background is now going to be 2 stops darker. Right. This is all happening instinctively in somebody who's been doing it this long. That's no longer happening with LEDs, right? Because that whole principle has changed. So it was very interesting and fascinating for me. It was kind of hungry for something else to learn. And it does allow for new ways of shooting that weren't really possible for the reasons I've just mentioned. So it has been fascinating, but it certainly just hasn't been a case of like, okay, cool, now you've got more colors. No, it certainly wasn't as easy as that.
So you mentioned new ways of shooting. Just give us some examples of what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, one of the ways like new ways of shooting is like I've just mentioned there was being able to bring like a panel. I use the rotolights, which are basically like a 12-inch, it's a circular panel, and it has like a diffusion cover on it already. So typically what I would use for portraits or even fashion is going to be like a beauty dish as a key light, right? So I'm going to have that key light in nice and close, probably like arm's reach away from the model if I'm using a strobe, right? So arm's reach away from the model, and it's just out of shot. Maybe I'm shooting underneath it and that sort of thing. Well, what that means with that light being so close is that you're able to see the drop off of light. So like there'll be a different exposure on the nose compared to the ear, right? If we were to have that beauty dish 20 feet away, we wouldn't see a difference in the exposure on the nose to the ear. So this is the inverse square law and light drop off, and this is what gives us 3-dimensional light. This is what gives these images that look of like, wow, they're really coming out of the screen or the page. And this is how we're able to do that, is by bringing in these lights quite close and to have that forced drop off. Now LEDs compounds that even further, right? Because now I don't need to worry about the beauty dish. I don't need to worry about the hotspot that a strobe would create. So like a softbox, or it always creates a hotspot, which should never really use anyway. But that's topic for another day. So this means that the panel I can bring in super close to the model and allows for a very, very sharp drop off of light, which then enables more shadows on the subject that I can then fill with other colors. So that's by far and away like the biggest change for sure. Yeah.
One of the things that I found with LED panels, and the light that's lighting me at the moment is an LED panel. It's basically a big
Same. Yeah.
LED like softbox essentially. The thing I find with those, I mean, there's pros and cons. On the pro side, there's virtually no depth to this light. So as opposed to having like an actual traditional light and then a softbox or something where you need space and
you're talking about physical depth of the light itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. So from a practicality point of view, I find that amazing because it just gives me a lot more space to work with.
And this is why the LED tubes have become so popular. I mean, it's like lighting with the stabilizers on, right? If you're going to buy light tubes, you can't fail, right? Because they take up no room. They have a very even spread of light and over a larger area, which is great for obviously people portraits. Yeah.
Exactly. And with some of the sort of newer things, like LED mats, for example, which is what my light's based on, there's some really cool things that I've seen recently, like blow up diffusers. I'm like, what is that?
That's right. Yeah, I saw those few years ago. I think it was like originally a German company many years ago. The
Yeah.
tubes, and I mean, it's great for film sets, right? Because you can hoist them
Yeah.
up, and you're not worried about or less worried about wind and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, really useful.
Yeah. And they like, for instance, Godox make them too. They like blow up.
Oh, really? Godox copied some. That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
wild. That's nuts. Godox just that's wow.
I know. And I used some at, where were we? I think we were at the podcast show and we were at a TikTok event, I think, with Godox, and we used some of their sort of blow up lights. And I tell you, it's really, they weigh almost nothing. They
Yeah,
pack away to like nothing.
into your rucksack, right? Yeah,
Yeah, and the light is really soft. It's really beautifully
because of
soft.
the
It's
size of it.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
because of the size of it and because of the spread within the modifier. And you blow the thing up with like a pump that you would use for an airbed. You go, huh? That's weird.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it works. The
Have,
one
have you seen
thing.
those ones which is basically comes out of your rucksack, the two like antennas? Have you seen those
Oh,
ones, the blow up ones?
no, I haven't seen
Yeah,
those.
wild man. Absolutely. I mean, I think they're like 4 foot each, and they're coming out of your
Oh,
rucksack like behind you,
wow.
like wings, right? And so
Oh,
you're just
wow.
walking around shooting, and you obviously wherever you are, you have this perfect even light on the subject because they're
Yeah.
behind you. Look, I'm not saying that they're particularly practical, but in terms of in terms of eye catching, that certainly is that.
But also, it's a technology that allows us to create all of these new ways to light things that have just been impossible before. But the one downside, and I wonder whether you have the same experience, that I find with the LED panels that I use, is that it's very difficult to really get a very low output out of them. I mean, basically, you turn them on to like everything from 0 to 10% is basically boom, it's all there. And then there's a gradual increase after that. So, do you have the same experience with which ones are you using again? You mentioned it earlier.
I'm using the Rotolite panels. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. They seem very low, and I mean, and yeah, I don't know. They seem to be very low when you've got them dialed down. Um, like, yeah, like I have noticed it on the cobs, which is like the single point LEDs. I have
Right.
noticed I've got a Godox 150 watt here, and that's a single point. And at 1%, I still need to use ND gels on that. So I
Exactly.
do know what you mean. I do know what you mean. So I wonder if it's kind of like those cob chips, which is doing that, or like. But the panel that I have seems to go down very very low. So you mentioned as well about the 0 to 10% thing, and like the power output, and this is something else which I find interesting as well, because coming from strobes, we used to stops of light, right? We just turn it up. Yeah, okay. Back in the day would be like 16th, eighth, quarter, half, well, sort of stuff, right? But and even on speed lights was like that as well. Now, fast forward to today, all these lights are percentage based, right? They're all,
Yeah.
turn it up by 1% all the way up to 100%. And what's interesting with that is that, and again, this is due to the inverse square law that it can't be calculated in the same way by the light source, that in the past, on my old Bowen strobes, for example, I would go, okay, I click up one notch. That's one extra stop of light.
Yeah.
And that's calculable by the fact that the inverse square law, right? I know that is going to give me, if I take a shot now, turn it up one stop, and I'm going to get one more stop on the model. Now, you don't see that in LEDs because of the way that the light is being spread, right? So that's why we have to work in percentages. So, for example, if we go from like 10% to 20% on an LED, that could well be one stop of power, right? If we're at the top end, we may need to go from 80% to like 97% to get one stop of power. So it's kind of like this curve of power output on the LEDs. So again, it makes it kind of, that's like another step in the intuitive nature of, if I'm working and I go, cool, I need one more stop, boom, or I've got two lights on the subject here, they're both correctly exposed, I need to turn them down by one stop to make them correct. It's a little bit more finessing with LEDs because it's like percentages, so you kind of have to get used to how much of a percentage that is doing on the power output.
I can see that being really tricky because I'm really used to just notches. Like I know like it's thirds of stops, so I go like click, click, click. And I do the exact opposite on my camera, and then I know we're exposed just the same way. Just that
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
I've cranked the light up by
yeah.
3/3 of a stop or like one stop, and I do. So I'm so intuitively that is a very quick way for me, and I'm guessing for many photographers of working. But then that doesn't really work with LEDs anymore.
So I haven't tested it extensively with the single point heads, but with panels, for the reasons I've just explained about how it's
Mhm.
spreading light over a larger area rather than coming from a single light source. I know the panels don't work like that, so you have to kind of like there's definitely a curve in the exposure. So now that we're talking about it now, I kind of need to go away and kind of test the single point heads. But in theory, they should fall off evenly because they're coming from the same centralized point. So I'll be interested to test that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
does that mean when you're working with LEDs, are you metering more than you did before?
Uh, so yeah, and this is always kind of a touchy subject, especially because I do a lot of training and education for brands as well as individuals, but the light meter is definitely a very useful tool, right? And it's a really useful tool when you're learning about light and photography. And I think it's really useful as a tool as you're kind of developing your skills because you're building up this visual language, right? That's what like this 10,000 hours deal, right? How do I get to that 10,000 hours even faster, right? How can I do that? And one of the things is building up your visual language of what's in front of you, right? So if I'm seeing a light coming in here and it's like, oh, that is probably about a quarter stop too hot, I need to turn that down. Like that's just going to come with experience, right? And a light meter is good because it'll because you'll go and you'll look at it and you go, okay, so that's what that looks like. That's what f4 at 250th of a second ISO 100 looks like. That's really useful to you, and I don't think it could be understated as to how important that is to you building up that knowledge of, okay, that's what that looks like, right? I know what that means on paper, right? I know what I'm looking at. Once we get into the world of kind of a little bit more advanced lighting, it starts to lose a lot of its kind of impact. And a light meter, I mean. And one of the reasons for that is a colored light. For example, if we just talk about colored gels, let's just talk about like an orange gel, for example. And I'm looking at that gel and I go, okay, I'm going to put some power into that. And that gel can look good when it's kind of this nice sunburst yellow color. That gel can look good when it's a nice rich orange color. And that gel can look good when it's a nice, kind of ochre, orangey color as well. So which is the correct exposure, right? Because I'm getting those three different colors through exposures, like the power of that light that's being pushed through that gel is changing the color that I'm getting as an output, right? So the more power I put through, the kind of the closer to yellow that gel is gonna get me. So what's the correct color here? So because the light meter is only seeing in gray, right? So the light meter is only going to tell me what gray looks like, and that's not really a huge amount of use to me with my colored work, right? So that's where the kind of light meter falls down. The other thing is as well is that back in the day, I'm going back some years now. Back when I was assisting up in London, the light meters were calibrated to the lens, right? So you can kind of be misled by a light meter today. I mean, I've got lenses here that are like a prime lens. I've got like a 105 f2 prime lens, and it is at least a stop brighter at f2.8 compared to my zoom lens of 24 to 70, right? Now, like there's nothing wrong going on there. It's just that there's less glass in the prime lens, so there's less light reaching the sensor when it's going through that zoom lens with all that elements and glass and that sort of stuff. So the light meter is being correct, but your lens is kind of tricking it. Like cinema uses t-stops, which is like the exposure received. So yeah, back in the day, light meters were calibrated to the lenses that we had. Nowadays, you just buy them off the shelf, and okay, cool. And like I said, it's good for learning. It gives you a gauge, it gives you like a close idea. But if you are relying on that and you're using my 105 f2 lens, your lens is going to be like, your shots are going to be overexposed. That's nobody's fault. The light meter's doing its job, the camera's doing its job. It's just that it's not calibrated to the lens that you're using. So I think light meters are a very useful learning tool. I think that once we get to a stage of making creative decisions based on how you want an image to look, I think they kind of lose their impact a little bit. Yeah.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps.
You've actually highlighted something that is super important for anybody listening and watching. This is a real world example, and I give you two examples of that. One is I very often when I shoot headshots in the past, what I used to do is I used to start on a 70 to 200, and then at some point I would switch to an 85, right? For a number of different reasons, but what would happen would be that the exposure, same settings, let's say, light didn't change, camera settings didn't change. You would see a noticeable difference with the 85, which would appear brighter. And the reason for that is, as you explained, because it's a shorter lens, there are not as many elements in the lens, so the light doesn't have to travel such a long way to reach the sensor. And it makes perfect sense, so therefore that lens is brighter. You can also see that in one of the latest Platypod videos that I make, where I not advertising it, but basically I can, since Platypod is the main sponsor of this podcast. Yay.
Absolutely.
Go check that out. Basically, where I teach how to do macro photography with a Mamiya C330, and what that camera does is it basically has what do you call it? Like you can move the lens further away from the film plane, and
is it like bellows?
Yeah, it's bellows. Yes, built-in bellows into the camera. And so what happens is you focus by moving the lens closer or further away from the film plane. And what that does is it basically means that if you're focusing on something that's really close to the lens, you need to move the bellows out, and therefore now the light has to travel further from the lens to the film plane, and therefore you have to adjust your exposure. And in the viewfinder, you have a little exposure compensation scale that tells you how many stops of light you have to add to your exposure in order to get a well exposed image. And is
this large format? What are you shooting on?
It's medium film. It's 120 film.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And it's really interesting, and it seems overly complicated in many ways. And of course, it's a twin lens, twin TLR, like a twin lens reflex camera as well. So you have to compensate not only for the exposure but also for the composition, because you get it with parallax
perspectives and that sort of stuff. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, especially when you're shooting macro in it, because it's probably the only, to my knowledge, it's the only, with the exception maybe for one, TLR camera that allows you to actually create macro shots with that camera, right? And
I'm going to check that video out. It sounds interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it's again, it's sort of one of these things that sort of seems way over the top and totally overly complicated. But the reality is there's something to having to kind of strain your brain a little bit to make these adjustments and these compensations in order to get the shot. There's something really fulfilling and satisfying about that, especially because you're shooting on film, and then you don't even know whether you got the shot or not. You're going to have to actually develop the film.
Right? Yeah.
That's where the fun is, right? And in the second video, I explain how you can use some cool Platypod tools to actually help you scan the film and the super easy way to develop it at home and all the rest of it. So it's a fun thing to try. But it's the exact principle that you mentioned there a second ago is at play here, where the distance between the front element of the lens and the actual film plane or the sensor in a digital camera will determine or will have an impact on the overall exposure of the image. And I always notice that in a very simple scenario when I'm doing headshots and I switch from a 70 to 200 to
Right, and it's experience that you go, okay, I need to kind of I need to adjust this accordingly, right? Yeah, or not freak out when you take a shot and it's like a stop overexposed. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember in the beginning, like when I first started out, like I was like, what the heck is going on? Something's wrong. Something's wrong. Until you really, when you start thinking about it, you go, well, obviously, it makes sense.
Yeah. And we're in a super luxurious position with digital, right? We can see like, oh, geez, that's a bit overexposed. This is why it's overexposed when you might switch lenses. And I see it all the time in workshops, right? I'm doing workshops and I'll be shooting and I'll go, okay, set your cameras to this, and then people come up there and they're like, whoa, you told me to set it to this, and it's like overexposed. It's like, no, it's like nothing's wrong. It's just that we need to account for you've got a different system to me. So like light meters are great learning tools, but yeah, they can really kind of get you into bother if you're not kind of aware of it. Yeah.
And as I always say, like light meters get you into a ballpark. You ballpark there, but then you need to refine it a little bit up or down. And virtually, I would say practically always, every time I use a light meter, I literally have to make fine adjustments after that. But it just gets me ballpark there.
Yeah, and I know some people can be very kind of technical with it, and they want to be able to get it dialed in and perfect, and they like that process, and that's absolutely fine. If you want to be that person, then you can absolutely do that. You just might have to spend a little bit more money on a light meter so that you can kind of calibrate it to the kit that you have, and then you can kind of eradicate all of that. You can just set up the profile for, okay, I'm on the 105, set the profile, take a boom, and then off we go, and you can kind of do that. So like don't think that light meters are just like it's been a lie. There are ways around it. Yeah, there are ways around it. Yeah.
That's the photography industry trying to screw us into like spending more money on light meters that you don't really need. That's the thing.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Of course, the other trick, a very simple trick, is to simply just take a shot, and then adjust. If you're tethering, for instance, into Lightroom or something, you just adjust the exposure and you go like, okay, well, I like the look of a third of a stop up, and then you can just go, well, I'm just going to change the settings on my camera to a third of a stop up, and then we're basically there. So you can kind of use Lightroom as your light meter in a weird way.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So I avoid tethering at all costs. Yeah, unless it's like in contract, it ain't happening. Because I mean, and look, I'm photographing people and that sort of thing. I'm not locked off on a tripod again. I don't like using a tripod and that sort of thing. But the tethering thing does open up a lot of different variables whilst you're shooting. Good and bad, because you can get kind of bogged down a little bit, as opposed to just, shooting through it, but yeah.
Tethering is always the thing. I think, to me, tethering serves a purpose sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. I would never want to tether just because I'm generally a lazy person. I would never want to, tether anyhow if there's no particular purpose behind that. Like, for instance, I don't know, if you're at an event, I don't really shoot events like that, but if you're doing like a photo booth type of a thing and the images immediately have to pop up on a screen, clearly you would have to tether something.
Yeah.
Or likewise, if you're, I don't know, when you run your workshops, do you tether? So you're
going to say that. Yeah, exactly. That's the only time I do it. Yeah. That's the only time I do it. So for obvious reasons, yes. So that other people can kind of see what's going on, right? But I think just whilst we're on that particular rabbit hole, my reticence for tethering on a kind of a shoot is it can slow down the creative process. And what I mean by that is you can just briefly talk about my process, but you can kind of go into a shoot with a plan, right? And that will be signed off by the client or art director or whatever it is. And what I mean by a plan is sort of what I do. Somebody's coming to me and go, Jake, I want this type of lighting. I go, okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely do that, and we can talk about the setting and the reality of doing that and that sort of thing. And cool, we signed off. We have our lighting diagram. We can go into it. Cool. What I think is really important for me and the way that I like to work is that I think that's really just this, like, the jumping off point, right? I need to be able to be open to options on the day that can kind of present themselves that there's just impossible for us to have foreseen, right? And that could be, okay, the model is taller than we expected, or Christ, I thought she was going to have dark hair, she's got platinum blonde hair, or no, we're not going with the white cotton jumpsuit now we're going with a black leather jacket, right? Like, these are normal variables that will present themselves on a shoot. This is nothing crazy here, but it does mean that I need to be kind of working and open to the idea of, like, okay, let's move this. I'm not on a tripod, I can move around, and I kind of need to kind of shoot through it. And whether we want to acknowledge this or not, but whenever we're working with other people, that is a collaborative process, right? And I need to be able
Absolutely.
to get into that flow state, if you like, with a model, right? And I don't really, like, to get the best out of that model, I really need to be able to work with her, and kind of, build up to this perfect shot. It's, I can do lighting diagrams until the cows come home, but I don't know how that model's going to react on the day and how she's going to be posing, all that sort of thing as well. So I need to be able to adapt to that, and the tethering will slow that down. Not only will the model want to see it, but the client wants to see it, and they will want to have, like, their own, oh, can we move this and can we move that, and, like, and I just hate that. I want to get shooting, and I want to be able to work through that process and get into that kind of, like I said, that kind of flow state with the other person and kind of get that perfect shot. It's very difficult to do that when you're kind of locked down with these, like, no, the hair needs to be there. It's just like,
Yeah.
and it's just like, yeah, let's not worry about, like, these little things yet. Okay, if there's little bits like that, maybe I can adjust it in post, but I need to get that killer shot first for us to even start worrying about these little things that you're getting hung up on because you've seen it on the screen.
And especially when you're working with another person, like an actual human model, as opposed to, like, I don't know, I don't know,
Still
a
life, right? Oh,
set.
yeah, I mean, yeah,
Yeah, still
exactly.
have, yeah.
If I was working still life, it would be tethering all day, no questions asked. Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's this thing where when you're working, with collaboratively with another person, you also really just have to get into that flow first. And that's why I find is that it's the first shot isn't going to be it. It'll be at some point further down the line when the chemistry is right and things start to flow. And um, I find that not only when I shoot a model, but also when I shoot headshots. You know, that's actually, and I've spoken about this many times on this podcast. That's why I don't do 20-minute headshot sessions, because the end result will never be satisfactory to me at all. I like to build a relationship with that particular client first, to the point where they feel a lot more relaxed in front of the lens and being, bombarded with, like, tons of light.
Yeah,
Then
and
it just takes time.
all clients, models, whatever it is, like, they have an idea in their mind of what they look like as well, right? And this is happening because when you show an image to one of these girls or whoever it is, and they go, "Oh my God, that's amazing," and you're like, "You hired me." I'm not being arrogant, but you knew what this was going to look like, and the only reason you're blown away is because you look amazing compared to your vision of yourself in your head, right? And you can tell, like, agency models, they don't give a shit, right? If you show them the image, you're like, yeah, it's fine, yeah, they know they look fucking stunning, right? Those agency models, if you can blow one of them away, then you're really good. But for the most part, they know they look good, right? So you're not going to get that
Yeah.
response from, like, a dyed-in-the-wool agency model who's been doing it for 10 years or something like that. It's just not going to happen. But for those regular people, when they go, "Oh my God, that's amazing," it's because you've really kind of, shown them this version of themselves that is way better than what they have in their own mind, right? So, but the flip is also true, right? So if they catch an image, like, behind you of, like, "Oh my God, oh no, I don't like that," like, it's so difficult to climb your way back out of that pit,
Yeah.
right? Because once you've sown that, that kind of seed of doubt in their mind, it's like so difficult to kind of drag them back out of that. So you really need to be, showing them that perfect shot that you nailed and get that response. And then if you can, and just another little tip here, but if you're doing a shoot with somebody and you're going to be doing multiple sets with them, start off on a set that you can that you know that you can knock it out of the park on. If you're doing like 5 or 6 sets in a day or something like that, don't start off with the hardest set of the day, right? Start off with the easy set that you know that you can kill. Because if you're going to show them images, of a model or a client or whatever, and that you're always going to get killer shots from this setup, that sets the bar then, right? It's just like, wow, and everybody's pumped. The makeup artist is like, oh my God, I love that. The models loving it. Everybody's pumped. Like, and then the rest of the sets are going to be that much easier. Never start on like the hard set of the day and you're just like, yeah, this got kind of good. I feel this is kind of good. Like, don't get me wrong. In Photoshop, I reckon I can really polish this up. Like, don't start with that. Like, don't start with that setup, because it is going to be a struggle for the rest of the day. Yeah.
And you can see how people might think it might be a good idea to start with the hardest thing first so you get it out of the way.
Get out of the way. I get that. But that's not for you, right? It's not for you.
Yeah. So I was actually going to ask you about your process. How do you plan your session? So let's say you have a number of different lighting setups pre-planned. How much pre-planning goes into it in that respect?
Huge amount. Everything is documented by me, or that like is usually 3D diagrams are all signed off. Everything's squared away. Everybody knows what we're going to be covering on the day, and everything's kind of roughly timed. But that's really to give everybody else peace of mind. I kind of know what I'm doing, but I think that if you're coming into a shoot and you're presenting that level of planning, there's a lot less stress in the room to begin with, right? Everybody kind of knows what they're doing and that sort of thing. So it's kind of weird, and I think that as photographers, we are lone wolves, right? I think we kind of work on our own for the most part, or sometimes for many years, and I get told all the time, "Oh, Jake, that's crazy! Like all the planning that you've provided." I'm just like, isn't that not normal? Like, is that not what everybody does? Because you just don't know, right? It's just what I've always done. But it was like, that's crazy. Yeah, that's. So look, it's certainly not. You don't have to do it. I certainly, a lot of people don't do it. But yeah, for me, everything is kind of planned out. And then for the reasons that I've also mentioned, I need to be able to be kind of fluid on the day to this corner of this bar that we're in, I didn't see in the plans or whatever, like, or in the BTS videos that I asked the bar owner to send me, didn't see this kind of nook here. It doesn't mean that, well, it's not in the plans. It's not in the schedule. Sorry, we're not doing it. Like, I need to be open to that. And, but I think as long as everybody's got that confidence going in, we can kind of switch it up. I'm not somebody that sticks to the plans. I just like to know that everybody knows what's happening. Yeah.
One of the things I really like about your stuff is the way you use lighting diagrams. What do you use to generate those? Because it's like 3D lighting diagrams that give you a really good idea before the event as to what kind of result you're going to get. What is it I use for that?
Yeah, I've used Satellite 3D. I've used them for many, many years, and I mean, it's not even expensive. It's a very powerful piece of software, and for the most part, you can throw whatever you want at that, and it will render it out pretty convincingly. I mean, it's getting better all the time, but it's very useful. Everybody kind of knows where they're at with it, and even from your point of view, you can go, okay, this is this is the kit that I need, right? This is exactly the kit that I need, rather than, especially if you're doing like 5 sets in a day and you're trying to go, what kit I need for 5 sets. Like, it's just like, those sorts of things just help me anyway to kind of go, okay, this is when I'm planning to pack everything up and that sort of stuff. This is what I need. But yeah, really powerful. I actually worked with them very early on, and they have all my gel packs in there as well, which was like fucking so useful for me when I'm kind of doing stuff. It's literally my gel packs in there, so I can just go, cool. It's literally using my exact colors, so it's super useful for me. So yeah, great piece of software. If you haven't used it or you haven't tried it out, Satellite 3D, really good.
It sounds like a really great tool to practice lighting, or maybe to play with some ideas and then learn how things work as you move things around. Do you think it's a great teaching tool?
I think it is a great teaching tool. Yeah, I think that it's kind of based on perfect scenarios. So like it doesn't show hotspots in softboxes, for example, right? And okay, fine. It's kind of a minor thing that is nuanced that only super nerds like me would kind of notice. But for the most part, it's going to give you a very good representation of how certain lighting modifiers work. And look, I don't know about you, but I know for me, when I can be out shopping with the wife or something like that, and I'll just see some light coming in from some sort of shop display, and I'll be like, that's kind of interesting. How's that? That's bouncing off that gold color, and that's creating this kind of dappled lighting effect and that sort of stuff. And you can then kind of take these abstract ideas and kind of pull it in there and go, okay, can I scale this up? Can I? So you can have like very kind of creative and abstract ideas and kind of build on them in that program. So it's not just a case of, it's not just a reference tool. It really is a tool for you to kind of see how something would react, and even down to the point that you can go, okay, I've got the blueprints from this club that we're going to be lighting in. I know the size of the room that I'm going to be in. I know the height of the ceiling. Boom, I can input it into this software, and I can go, do you know what, like, we just can't use that boom in here. It's just that boom is just not going to fit, right? So it's like stuff like that you would think that you may not think about until you're there, and it's like, oh, shit, how are we going to get this light up there now? But whereas if you can really just plug all this in a 3D space and kind of practically walk around it, then it's super useful for that. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool if it would work the other way around, where you can basically, upload a photograph into it and it just goes, here's how you shoot that. Ba-ding! And you go, oh, right, cool. I need that light and that modifier and this size of room. And
yeah, I didn't want to kind of talk about this, but I mean, you can kind of do that with Chat GPT now, right? It's not like it's certainly got its limitations. I mean, like, you can use Chat GPT to go, what was the Lightroom preset on this image, right? And it'll go, can you work out this image? Can you give me what Lightroom preset this is? And it does a fairly good job of reverse engineering it and giving you the inputs. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So, like, it's. I wonder how it would fare in the future with kind of lighting, right? Because technically, light always travels at the same speed and in a straight line. That doesn't change. Light has a pretty much defined algorithm, if you like. So technically, if you gave it enough data, it should be able to reverse engineer an image.
One of the fun things I used to do with my youngest daughter, and it's ever since she was like 3 maybe or something, I used to teach her how to read light modifiers by reading the catch lights in people's eyes. So I remember, like a long time ago, we were in Germany.
I just want to play I Spy, Daddy, please.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did.
No.
So, because we were on a train platform, and there was a poster there, and it was, I can't remember. I forget what superhero poster it was, like some DC movie poster, whatever. And it was like an ensemble cast, right, of different like superheroes. And we were waiting for a train. I was looking at this, and I'm like, oh, I've just realized that these people were all shot in different places, and the whole thing is a composite because the catchlights were different in shape in each one of those characters, right? So it's like, okay, well, this guy was shot with a square softbox. That was obviously an octobox, blah, blah, blah. And so I taught my daughter, who was 3, how to read that. And then ever since, like, or very often when we're in some tube station and stuff, she would look at a poster, she goes, oh yeah, look at that. These 2 people weren't in the same place. Because it's like, oh, right, okay, cool.
We were in Boots doing Christmas shopping, and like, with my wife, she was getting some bits, and I was just off in the makeup department, just looking at the catchlights and all the beauty posters, going, mate, you are just right splat bang in the middle of that light. You could have moved that a little bit to the side. Like, you're just blocking so much light there. It's like, oof. I know. It's terrible. Yeah.
I know. I find myself doing the same thing. It's terrible. Like, every time. But even when you go like to like Superdrug or something, it's some place like that.
There's loads of those, and that's one of the kind of the few places now where you actually get to look closely at an image, because we never normally see anything in print anymore. It's just like, well, I can't zoom in on that tiny JPEG.
Yeah, exactly. when people want to get into creative lighting, what would be your sort of general recommendation as to where would somebody start? Would it be like a good idea to start with ChatGPT or like, software like
No,
Satellite
no,
3?
heathen, delete
Or
that.
how
How
would you
dare
start?
you? Yeah. I think. Hmm. There's there's a couple of. I'm trying to think about what the average route for somebody is now, and what I mean by that is, I mean, 25 years ago, when I started in film, it was different, right? You didn't get that same feedback loop of instant, understanding of what you're seeing in front of you, when you're looking at the digital image. So you were kind of you were kind of taught to see the light a lot more than we're taught now, right? We are taught to adjust our lighting based on what we see on the back of the camera, whereas before we were taught to kind of see the light. And that doesn't happen as much anymore. But I think one thing I'll say is ditch speed lights as soon as you can, right? That's going to be my pro tip here. Ditch speed lights as soon as you can, because they will teach you bad things about lighting that are just a pain for you to kind of unlearn when you actually get proper strobes or whatever it is. And like you can get you can get like the AD200s, I think, like the Godox ones, and they have the exposed bulb, right? That's really what I'm getting at. I want you to kind of get one of these exposed bulbs lights as soon as possible, really, because that those are designed to spread light around the modifiers that you're going to be using and that sort of thing. So try and get like a half decent light sooner rather than later, because I spent years using speed lights and I resent it. Because you have to work real hard to make speed lights look good. So just skip that bit, right?
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. I went through the school of hard knocks when it comes to speed lights. It's the same thing. I mean, it's too.
it is, right? Yeah, I mean, like you
Yeah.
can use them, but you have to work really hard,
Mm.
whereas strobes is just already sets you off on the in a good spot, right? um and then if you want to get into creative lighting, like, I mean, color is definitely a way to go, right? You just start off with one color, right? You just start off with, you could just coloring the background if you wanted, right? Just start off with a regular headshot, nice white light on the subject, and then just add a gel to the wall behind them. Start off there, and then once you're kind of happy with how that's looking and the exposure of that and the color of that and the separation that you're able to get, bring that onto the subject. Have them, rather than looking straight to camera, have the subjects looking off to one side, and then that light being that, like, the key light being on the axis of their nose, so that it's casting shadow on the backside of the face, as it were. And then you can add a gel to that shadow, right? So creative lighting is this. Yeah, it's like, what even is the definition of creative lighting? It's really difficult for me, because for me it's color. Like, you know you can go, well, I'm using 6 lights, that's actually pretty creative. Yeah, I could see that as being like an idea of what creative lighting is, but I don't think it needs to be complicated like that for it to be creative.
There's always this color and this shape, and I always feel like the vast majority of people tend to almost like ignore color to a degree, and to see work
But
like
it's
your
hard for
work, for
one.
example. Yeah, it's
It is
difficult.
hard.
Exactly.
Yeah. And really, I was trying to, in my mind, I'm trying to think about how can we be creative without spending much money, right? Because you could go, well, let's just get some gobos, right? That'd be cool. We get some gobos, get some
Yeah.
modifiers on there, create some shapes. That's definitely creative lighting. Creating shapes, like you said, shaping the light and that sort of stuff. And that's what we used to do. Like, we were using like speed lights with cereal boxes and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we were, yeah, we really didn't like spending money.
Yeah. Yeah, or fabrics,
But
different fabrics, like,
yeah,
I
exactly.
remember.
Yeah, you can do exactly. Yeah, so you can create all sorts of creative effects with light, without having to buy expensive modifiers and that sort of thing. Because that's usually where everybody goes, right? They go, cool, got these lights, now I can get these different modifiers, and that's what's going to be creative. I think color is a very easy and cheap way to start to get creative with light. Yeah.
Is that where LEDs maybe have the advantage? Because now you have, rather than having to get used to using different gels, you can now turn it to any color. Or is that maybe even making things harder because now you have so many options that it's actually harder to focus in on some basics?
That's a really good subject that I don't think anybody kind of talks about, and I think it warrants its own tangent. But and your point of like 16 million colors is surely better than 12,
Yeah.
obviously. But you're right; it has significant downsides. I think that I'm kind of looking at it from a beginner's point of view. So what I mean by that is LEDs, I think, are exceptional at doing like specific tasks. So like my Rotolight panels is without question the best like key light I've ever used. It's beautiful. Just the light on the skin is like second to none, without question. But I can't modify that, right? I can't turn that
Right.
into a slit of light. I can't turn that into a snoot or a little spot of light. It does that one thing, but it does it exceptionally well. And I think LEDs at the moment, like tubes, right? Tubes are like, yeah, cool. Tubes are amazing. Everybody's using tubes and they look beautiful, super easy to use. Like you can't fail if you're just, using, your live view and you're setting up your tubes. Like, I'm sorry, like photography has never been easier, right? You cannot fail, right?
Yeah.
But tubes are good at that one thing, right? You can't modify them. They're beautiful, even light across the body, but you can't narrow them into a single point and that sort of stuff. So the point I'm getting at here is when we're starting out, we want to go, okay, we want some flexibility, and the best way for that is going to be these single point lights, right? Now, LEDs have that at the moment, these single point lights, but those single point LEDs where you, for the most part, plug an S-fit or a Bowens mount modifier onto it, like a softbox, a grid, snoot, barn door, list goes on, right? So we can do whatever we want with those. Now, in the LED world, those are still pricey. So if you were just starting out and you wanted to save money, you can get like an S-fit strobe for like 100 quid. And, it's going to be 150, 200 watts or something like that, which is plenty. It's just plenty, right? So if you were like, look, I don't want to spend much money. I want to start off and I wanted to avoid speed lights, then going down the route of like a strobe that you plug into the wall for like 100 quid is crazy. That does like 90% of what you need. Sure, you can spend a lot more money and get other benefits like a little bit more consistency, a little bit more power, a little bit more controllability and TTL and yada yada yada, all that sort of stuff. But for the most part, in terms of you getting creative with lighting, for 100 quid strobe, it's gonna do a huge amount for you. Yeah, it
Yeah,
really
and
is.
if you want a little bit more flexibility, so you mentioned the 8200s or the 8200 Pro 2s that have just come out,
That's
even
right.
give
They got a
you a
modeling
modeling
button.
light.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can even do a little bit of video, or at least you have a modeling light. And
Do you know how much they are off the top of your head now?
they're in British pounds. I want to say they're in the sort of 250 pound region. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
Something around that. I bought a couple of 8200 Pros a few years back to take with me on the plane. And I went to Norway to shoot Northern Lights and Vikings, on location
Wow.
portraits of Vikings, basically in
Okay.
their natural habitat in Northern Norway. And I know it was nuts, but to be honest with you, I mean, you just have to imagine, like we were tracking out, like we went out to the Lofoten Islands, which is in the Arctic Circle, and we were tracking out to places that were pretty inhabitable, and we were tracking out there, with our Viking models and everything. And so taking a couple of these 8200 Pros with us really made a difference because you could literally walk out into the flipping prairie,
Phenomenal.
right?
Phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal. You don't need any more than that at all.
I'd love to see the sales figures on those 8200s. They must have sold
Huge.
so many of them. There is not a person that I speak to that doesn't have at least one of them. It's crazy. So yeah,
Yeah.
to your point, they are excellent lights, and I think that if you had a little bit of extra cash to spend, and you were like, okay, I want something, I've got 200 or 300 to spend on a light, those 8200s, yeah, I mean, yeah, they're always going to serve you well. And for one of the main reasons that you've just mentioned is you can just throw them in your bag.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the battery power on those, they last absolutely forever. We were shooting all day long, and when I got back to our
That's
accommodation, I was
crazy.
like, oh, the batteries are still halfway. Unbelievable.
And that is a core benefit of flash over LED, right? For sure,
Yeah.
huge. Is the fact that they just go and go and go. Right, I've got the Bowen's battery powered ones here, but they're flash. I mean, yeah, they just go all day, no questions asked, which is certainly not the case with LEDs. You just can't do it. Yeah.
So do you use LEDs exclusively now, or is it sort of a mix
Pretty
between?
much, yeah. I mean, and I'll say this: I used flash one time last year.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I will caveat that and say that the Rotalights that I use they have the unique ability to flash, right? And I say unique ability because I still think they're the only LED lights that can flash in full color, right? I think Godox, obviously took inspiration from other brands, and they
That's the
brought
way
out
to put it.
lights that could flash as well, but they didn't do it in color. So these rope lights are still the only ones that can flash in color. So this is useful to me because I do a lot of long exposure work. I still do a lot of long exposure lighting, and I kind of need to have a flash in there somewhere to kind of keep the model crisp, right? So I'm doing that with these Rotalights, which is just such a I mean, I just can't tell you how incredible that is to have all of that and to flash in those 16 million colors as well is wild. But to your point there about last year, there was one shoot, it was a hair shoot I did in a salon, and I looked at because most hair shoots are done in the salon, and most salons are on the street, and that usually means that they have just this whole wall of just glass in front of them,
Yeah.
right? Which you can't block out. So I was kind of like, do you know what? I was kind of hesitant, just kind of hesitant as to. I just don't think it's worth the risk. Let me just take. Would you shoot it with strobes because of the power, right? And this is the biggest kind of pushback that I see from many photographers is power, right? Where is the power? Can it compete? Can I use them? I shoot all over the place. And look, I think that it is a very real concern. It is something to be mindful of. That being said, I just received a bunch of kit from Nanlite, who they just sent me a 500-watt head, right? And it's a full color head, and it does have an external ballast and that sort of thing as well. But for the most part, it's a strobe style head. It's 500 watts, full color, and I would say that it's coming into the realms of affordability, right? I mean, because there are heads out there now, 1200 watts, 1500 watts on film sets pretty regularly. I've certainly been in those situations where we have those heads, and the reason cinema needs those is because those heads need to be like 30 feet back there, right? You can't have them in shot. Like, we need to shoot the scene. We're not doing a headshot here. We need to shoot the scene. So on film sets and that sort of thing, we're starting to see these 1500 watt and up heads, LED heads, becoming a feature. And one of the kind of reasons that's happening on film sets and TVs is because they get a huge kind of kickback for carbon efficiency, right? So if they can reduce their carbon footprint, they can save a shit ton of money. So, before they were using like 10K tungsten heads and that sort of stuff. I mean, they just got like a diesel generator, just like 10 diesel generators just knocking about outside. Like, yeah, they're running those 10K lights like all day. Like, it's a huge amount of power. Running tungsten like that was just colossal. So in an effort to kind of combat this, there are kind of kickbacks to be had for reducing your carbon footprint on set. And it's significant. Hence why we're seeing a lot of cinema and TV kind of embracing the LEDs, because like, it's like, we have to.
Yeah,
right?
But
It just saves us so much money to do it.
Yeah, but also purely from a practicality point of view. I remember doing a shoot not too long ago, where I lit everything as a video shoot, and I lit everything with LED panels, and it was portability and flexibility on location that really enabled us to actually do this shoot in the location that we did it in, because it was just a matter of carrying out a bunch of LED panels rather than having to move big lights around all the time. And of course, the fact that they were battery powered just meant that we were totally flexible in like moving around the location as well. And I don't think that would have been. I know that particular shoot in that particular location simply wouldn't have been possible with bigger lights and bigger modifiers. And it wasn't the location where I would have worked. So, now the power thing, I can see that as a problem. Like if you, like, let's say you live in Florida and you're shooting outside and, and you're trying to overpower the sun, blah, 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 and all of that. LEDs could be a problem. You might think like, well, actually, no, flash is the way to go because that's the only way I can do it. If you live in England, maybe not so much because overpowering the sun basically means turning a light bulb on outside.
I've used my lights outside, for daylight shoots, where I'm using it as a key light and I'm just using the sun as a fill light. Yeah, it's definitely doable, but I can see where people are kind of hesitant, especially if you're like, I shoot a lot all over the place. I don't know how bright it's going to be and that sort of thing. But yeah, in that instance for that hair salon, it was a case of, let's just take the strobes and just cover ourselves. I mean, look, I could have just taken several meters of black velvet and just whacked that up in the window and we would have been squared away. Cool. But but that was the only time I shot flash last year, which is wild. It's crazy to me.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Now, for those of us listening and watching this who are thinking, oh, maybe I'm used to shooting flash, but maybe LED might be a really good idea. Now, the secondary impact that decision has is, of course, on camera settings, because for those of us being used to flash, it's a fairly simple, straightforward way of setting up your camera. You go like, okay, well, sync speed is 1/200th of a second, shabang. Everything else hangs under that. In what way does your approach to your camera settings specifically change when you change to LEDs? Because now
really
you
good question. Really good question. Yeah. And I think a lot of people kind of struggle with this because you're absolutely right. You nailed it, right? I mean, as a studio shooter, my camera was like, so I think I have my shutter speed at 125th of a second, like ISO 100. Like they didn't move, and they don't move for months.
Exactly right.
Right. That's just that's it. Because I'm in control of the lights. I have the juice to be able to do that. Sure, I might want to change the F number around. Cool. I adjust my lights for my F number, but like the camera just does not move off ISO 100, 125th of a second.
And that's a traditional way of teaching. Where you go like, well, the first thing you do is you create a black frame, and then you basically then sculpt your light from there. But of course, with LEDs, it's a different approach, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. And I see, just briefly, every Monday I do like a share a shoot on my Facebook page, which means that my community shares images in there and we kind of go through them either on a live stream and that sort of thing and give feedback and that sort of thing. Now, one of the things that I see, fairly regularly from people who are kind of making that transition from flash to LED is kind of the issue that you're kind of alluding to there, which is the ambient light, right? So flash, regardless of what you set your shutter speed to, is probably a minimum of 4,000th of a second, right? So it's very, very fast. If your shutter speed's at 200th or 125th, what you're seeing is captured at 4,000ths of a second, hence the flash. So with LEDs, that's not the case. So when you're shooting at 125th, you're seeing 125th because that's the ambient light. So what that means is you can kind of forget that you've left the toilet light on in the background. And before, when you were using flash, that wasn't an issue. Now we need to be mindful of that. Now we need to be mindful of the whatever it is, somebody doing, somebody opens a door while you're shooting or something like that, and let's light in, that is going to affect your
the light pollution
settings. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So like there are pros and cons to that. So some of the pros of that is that you are able to kind of, something that I've been kind of playing with the last year or so now, is playing with more of an organic look to the final shot. And what I mean by that is I've done some shoots like at a 60th of a second and even a 50th of a second, right? And I'm kind of allowing that sense of movement to be in my frame, right? And I'm kind of embracing the fact that there is going to be this slight movement, and that's just not possible with Flash. Like, that is brand new to me. Like, this idea is totally brand new. Like, you just can't do that. You can set your shutter speed at a 50th of a second on Flash. It's still going to be 4,000th, right? Yeah. So I think LEDs open up other possibilities that I kind of hadn't thought about, like wind in the hair, right? So if you got a fan on the hair and you shoot with Flash, the hair is caught every single time. But if you're shooting at a 60th, the hair will be moving, right? So you get this kind of slightly more real, organic looking image to me, which I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm kind of drawn to. I think a lot of images can be a little bit clinical now, and I think the LEDs can kind of help with that. And I think that opens up a bunch of things. The other thing as well is that I mentioned to you before about my camera never coming off 125th ISO 100, right? That's just the way I was trained, right? Back in the day, coming into the early or like late 90s, if you were shooting on film that wasn't ISO 100, you were an artist. Right? Like, that's a creative decision. Like, you're not doing that as an option. I'm not going to shoot on ISO 400 film as an option, right? You're doing that knowing that is going to be grainy as hell. And you're okay with that. You want that grit, that's fun. That's fine. But now I think, I hold that same stigma when it comes to choosing ISO. It's just not the case with modern cameras, right? And I think that, any digital camera made, this side of the turn of the century is pretty good in terms of ISO, and especially like the newer mirrorless cameras in ISO are very, very good. Couple that with the black magic that is being used in Lightroom with denoise. I don't know what spooky shit they're doing in there, but what that tool in Lightroom does to eliminate noise is crazy. But my point being is that I think, us old school shooters who are just terrified to come off ISO 100, it's not fair. You can, I can shoot ISO 400, maybe even 800, and nobody's going to know. Right? Nobody's going to know, because that noise is not film noise from like back in the day. It's just a way of giving you extra light. And you look at new students today, right? If you look at a new student today doing art college or whatever, and they've got their mirrorless camera that their parents got them for Christmas or whatever, like, they don't give a shit about shooting at ISO 800. Like, it's not this big fear for them. It's just a tool. It's an option to get more light. It's not the, oh my god, I'm going to get tons of noise option. It's just not there anymore. So I think the argument with power and LEDs is something that I've kind of learned as well. Like, a lot of my shots now are ISO 200, right? Whereas maybe a couple of years ago, they're ISO 100, because I don't quite have the juice there. But it's fine, right? It's okay, to shoot at ISO 200.
Exactly. This is always, like, when I do like talks in a camera clubs, for example, this is always my argument about battery powered strobes, for example. And so people are like, oh yeah, but I don't want to run out of juice. I'm like, well, you're shooting a relatively modern Canon camera, so why would you want to shoot it at ISO 100 when just by moving it to 200, you would, no pixel peeper can tell the difference between ISO 100 and 200 nowadays.
And let's not forget, if you do that from ISO 100 down to 200, like, in terms of strobes, every single shot you take is half the power.
Exactly. And you get twice as many shots.
Exactly, twice as many shots. You're literally, like, that's what the power of these, strobes is doing. Exactly. You're literally halving the power. Yeah.
And that's also the thing, like we were talking earlier about speed lights, for example. I used to run my headshot business solely on speedlights for the first maybe 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and you deserve a commendation, mate. Absolute.
But the thing was, like,
is in the post.
Exactly. But people used to say, like, oh yeah, but how do you deal with batteries? Like, do you have to switch the batteries out all the time? It's like, no, I shoot at ISO 400. Okay. You can't tell. But first of all, you can't probably tell the difference. Well, that's it. But you have to change them out. So, but the whole point was, first of all, I'm shooting at ISO 400 because you can barely see a difference there. Even on the D750, you could barely see a difference between ISO 400 and 100. But the other thing is also, remember what the intention behind this was. I'm not shooting images that end up on the side of a bus. I'm shooting images that end up on a website or as an email signature 150 by 150 pixels wide. So nobody can tell me that ISO 400 is the kind of grain or noise that you can make out in an image like that. It's ridiculous, you know. So you know, it's that sort of thing. But with LEDs and the fact that you have to be mindful of movement, do you run into issues with sharpness at all?
I mean, I shoot Nikon, so like that ship has sailed, you know. I mean, it's there's sharp, and then there's Nikon sharp. So I mean, you gotta just let that go, man. You can't be chasing that. Wait, you're talking about movement, or are you talking like, is that what you mean, right? And that's, you know, and that's like I said to you, I'm kind of embracing that, rather than being terrified of it. So no, I'm not shooting at shutter speed 500. You know, I'm just not doing that. I'm not shooting at 250. I'm like, the highest I'll go is 125th, right? But for you know, for some of my more kind of organic looking environmental portraits, I'm kind of okay going down to a 60th and a 50th and just kind of letting it breathe a little bit, you know. But that's just me. You know?
That really that sort of continues on from, you know, another thing you talked about in the last episode, where you said one of the sort of downfalls or pitfalls of modern cameras is very often that they create very clinical looking images, and that, in your opinion, a lot of photographers nowadays actually move back to slightly older technology in order to kind of give it that grit and natural, you know, personality in their images. Is that something that you feel using LEDs over strobes sort of allows you to do?
Yeah, that is a can of worms. I need to be careful here. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of spoken about this, you know, and I've even written very extensive articles on the kind of like the homogenization of modern photography, right? And where that comes from is sometimes with education, right? I think, you know, we have one kind of idea comes out, and then 24 other YouTubers will make the same video on the same thing, and you know, you kind of get into these loops of very similar images or similar styles coming out. And one other aspect of that is the kit that we use, right? And I think that, I'm just going to come out and say it, like, Sony cameras are excellent cameras. I just want to be clear in saying that they are excellent cameras. And I think that when it comes to marketing excellent cameras, I think it's kind of easy to say, do you want more of your images to be in focus? Do you want more of your images to be correctly exposed? Do you want more of your images to be sharper? Like, these are all just easy tick boxes, right? This is just like, yeah, this is music to my ears. I want all those things. I want them. Do you want less vignetting in the edges? Do you want, you know, more edge to edge sharpness? Like, oh yeah, just give me all of that. I love all of that. Right. Very easy to sell that. But what can end up happening, in my opinion, is that some of those images can kind of look the same, right? Can kind of look very kind of similar. And again, like, if you shoot Sony, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Please, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, for me and the work that I do, or the work that I'm seeing, I'm kind of, we live in a world of AI where it feels like half the images we see are AI now, right? Or could be. Is that AI?
Yeah.
Oh no, it was just taken on a Sony camera, right? And this is kind of where we can, you know, kind of be like we need to be careful. You know, I'll just tell you a story. I used to manage a photo studio a million years ago, and I used to be responsible for training kind of like the new staff coming in, right? And they'd usually be, you know, fresh out of college or whatever, art college or whatever. Yeah, got my little bit of paper, and I'm ready to go, Jake. Get me in the studio. Just put me in there. I was like, yeah, that's cool. Just before you do that, just you know, let's just have a quick chat about photography, what you're going to be doing, what you think we're doing, and all that sort of thing. So I just want you to sit down. I just want you to write out like 3 or 4 things that you think make like a perfect photograph, right? Just write down, just a small list of things that you think make a perfect photograph. And, you're going to get in focus, right? You're going to get correctly exposed. You're going to get, rule of thirds, the white balance. Do you know what I mean? Like these things, like this is the list that I would typically get, right? Eyes sharp and all this sort of stuff. Okay, cool. And I go, brilliant, love that. Okay, I want you to give me that list. I want you to now go away and I want you to just go online for an hour. And I just want you to bring me back 20 images that you think are the greatest 20 photographs that have ever been taken by humanity. And I want you to bring them to me. Like this is entirely up to you, but you bring back the 20 best photographs that have ever been taken and show them to me. So they go away or whatever, Pinterest or whatever, and they come back and they bring these 20 images. I go, wow, these are incredible. These are beautiful. Wow, some beautiful images. Now, when you look at these images, this is like one of the first things you think, wow, that's in focus. Ooh, the white balance on that. It's bullshit. It's fucking not. This is not what makes a great photograph. Like these are not the elements of these iconic images that we see, or we scroll through 1,000 images on Instagram, and the one image that maybe makes us stop today. If you're looking at that image and you're going, that's in focus. That's crazy. Like these are just prerequisites. These are just like the basic things. Like this is not. These things that you're listing out that you think make a perfect image, perfect photograph, is not what makes an amazing photograph when you see it, right? It's going to be like the pose or the expression or the power or the color dynamics or the angle that it was taken at it's just a million and one things that you can, and you can do this yourself. You can do this yourself. You can go away, choose 20 images and be honest with yourself and look at those 20 images, because everybody's 20 images will be different, which is why I used to do it, right? Which is why it's really important. I do this when I'm training new people. I go, like, your style that you don't think you have is hidden in those 20 images, because everybody's 20 images is different, right? And if like there will be common areas in that image. So for like one person, it'll be a lot of these shots are taken at a low angle at like 50 mil, or there'll be a huge use of like complementary colors, or there'll be really dynamic, edgy posing. Like everybody's 20 images are different, right? But within those 20 images is your preferences and your style. And that is what's going to be speaking to you. But at no point is it that's correctly exposed. Love the white balance on that. It's fucking bullshit. It's just not. Yeah. It's just not. This is not what makes these great iconic images. And for some reason, like camera manufacturers just love to use the very simple, like, yeah, it's going to be in focus. This next shot you take is going to be in focus. Like, okay, cool. I need something else though, really. I'm looking for something else. So I think that this is great. Like these cameras can do that, but I think that they can end up creating images that kind of look the same. And to your original point that you brought up, however long ago it was, that I am, seeing a lot of people using these old lenses that they grabbed off eBay, or, they shoot in film, or maybe they're, maybe using a couple of lens filters here and there, or maybe they're, just trying to take the edge off, their images, like me, shooting at 60th or 50th of a second, just trying to give it a little bit of life, give it, breathe some life into this very kind of clinical medium that we have. Like, we're not a photocopier. We're not trying to replicate exactly what's in front of us. We're trying to say something beyond just a Xerox of the scene in front of us. Like, what are you trying to say with this image? Are you trying to empower that woman that you're photographing? Are you trying to make the CEO of this company look like the guy? Like, you're going to get down low, make him look powerful in shot, or are you, trying to shoot more glamour work, and you're going to be up high shooting down with her on the bed and that sort of stuff. Like, think about what you're trying to say with your images, rather than just letting the camera do all this work for you.
That's the shooting with intent part. And as my friend Steve Brazel used to say, or he always says that, it's like, if you're focusing on the grain and the noise in an image, then that image probably has bigger problems than just noise.
Yeah, I mean, I if you're noticing that, then yeah, you're right. You've kind of lost the meaning a bit of the image. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of photographers nowadays are sort of drawn to maybe rediscovering film or like older technologies, because and I see that in myself really. It's I've sort of recently really gotten into having fun with the medium format film, and really it's an adventure for me. There's no professional connotation to that. It's not like I'm
Yeah.
not selling prints or anything. I'm just doing it really because I think it's a personal challenge and it's just fun. And as I always say, like, so in this, for me, in this sort of overly digital world, where everything is, perfect and pristine and quick, and we're talking about volumes all the time. On a typical shoot, I come back with thousands of images. But when I go and I spend an afternoon shooting a roll of medium format film, I come back with 12, where really
Yeah.
11, because on my camera, the first frame is
I know,
always,
right? Yeah.
so it's budget. So, that's fun. It's a challenge. It's challenging me as a photographer, and the fact that I can see what I've just done on the back of the camera screen, it adds to the anticipation and the thrill of it. In a sense.
Yeah, I think. I got like a Pentax 669 up there that I still shoot with, and I don't really share those images, but I think it's an extremely useful exercise, because I think that it's very difficult to kind of replicate what your brain is doing when you're shooting film. What I mean by that is you're kind of forced into thinking about every aspect of the image before you press the button, right? Which we become very lazy about doing, And I know when I'm shooting film and I've got, like you say, like 12 shots or whatever it is, I definitely don't think I've ever got 12 shots. But my point being is that, I'm like, okay, am I happy with this? Composition is looking good. Yeah. Okay, maybe the model's chin could do with coming up a tiny bit. Okay, that hair light, just maybe get a little bit more, bring that hair light a little bit higher. You're really, really thinking about the shot before you take it. And it's very difficult to get yourself into that headspace on digital, because there is no repercussions, right? There is zero repercussions. So I think it's an incredibly valuable learning tool, for anybody listening. You don't need to go out and buy a medium format. You can just go pick up any kind of film camera and kind of play around with it, during a shoot. And I'm not saying, look, pack it in, guys. Sony had their time. It's back to the old Olympus, right? The old Olympus OM1s. Like it's time to get back. I'm not saying that. The next shoot, do everything that you would normally do, and then at the, just save a few minutes at the end of the shoot or the setup and go, let's just grab the old 35mm, let's bring it in here and let's just grab some shots, and see if your brain starts acting slightly differently, because I think there's a huge amount to be gained from shooting like that, for sure.
Absolutely. Like, slowing things down will just allow you to really focus on all of those important details, I think.
I think as well, the resulting image is something that I'm fascinated by. And look, this is coming from, I was born in 1980, so I was coming up, late 90s, and we were kind of raised on the, Vogue, Tatler's Bazaar, all that sort of stuff, the Face ID here in the UK. Like we were raised on that in terms of inspiration. This is pre-internet, remember? So, that kind of, just that iconic medium format fashion image is just ethereal to me. It really is bizarre as to what power that kind of holds. And I shoot medium format film now again. I hadn't done it for 20 years, but shooting it again now, and like I am still blown away. I've got an image in my mind now that I'm just like, I can't get close to that with digital, and I can't put my finger on it. It's like, why do people listen to vinyl, right? Why do people listen to the LPs, and it's like, oh, the sound is warmer and all that shit. And I get it, but like, that doesn't really mean anything. Like, what are we translating here? What are we really talking about? You can say these words, these flowery words, but like, what does that really translate to when we're trying to break that down and kind of recreate that idea? And you mentioning about the shutter speed and LEDs and that sort of stuff, back in the day, tons of black and white shooters in Vogue and that sort of thing were all shot with tons of movement. And there was just like such an energy to those images. I loved those kind of 90s Vogue shots. Okay, granted, you got the era of the supermodel back then, heroin chic. I mean, it was definitely a time to be into fashion and photography, damn near the golden age, really. But that being said, like there was a if you get the opportunity to look at some of those old magazines, there is an energy in those shots that is just not present today, rightly or wrongly. You don't have to like it or not, but you can at least accept that there's a difference there, and I think that's kind of interesting to explore for me personally.
Yeah, and using technologies like film, I mean, inverted commas, old technologies, can sometimes really just be that impetus to really stretch your creative mind as well. That's what I find. There's this thing about the sort of the labor bias, where by the more energy you put into something, the greater you perceive the outcome to be, and I can definitely tell when after I've shot a roll of black and white 120 film or something, I then put all the effort into developing it and scanning it, and finally I've got it. I don't really print per se, but like when I've got the final image on my screen, I look at that, and to me, that image means a lot more than any of the 2,000 or 2,500 shots I shot the day before on my digital camera could ever mean, because it's this, I put, I have to divide the amount of effort by 2,000 shots rather than, by getting, I went out to London a few months ago with a friend of mine, and we were basically, we set ourselves a little challenge. It was just a fun thing. It was a nice sunny day, blue skies, and we decided to shoot a roll of color 120 film. And we went to Chinatown in London because we thought like, oh, well, this, they've got red lanterns and the kind of gold and the blue sky. This could work really well, and we just decided to spend an afternoon just shooting one roll each. And it literally took us all afternoon to shoot 12 pictures.
Yeah.
That was we had a great time. It was a great time. I mean, although we spent maybe 4 or 5 hours, creating those images, it's not only the final image. To me, it contains all of the labor that we put into it, So those images have a different meaning. It's a little bit like, if you imagine if you had only one image of your partner or your child, and that's the one image that you remember them by, that image would be so much more important and would hold so much more gravitas than if you had 4,500 images of that person on your phone.
It's a weird thing that I think modern photographers struggle with clients, right? Because 4,000 images is way better. What are you talking about? 4,000 images is way better. Like, I don't like that metric is not difficult to understand. 4,000 is way better than one, right? And it's like, you're kind of stuck with it. It's like, yeah, but what if we had one phenomenal, just like, groundbreaking image as opposed to 4,000 essentially iPhone shots, which is what it comes down to. And look, I think that, and this is a broader topic maybe for another day, but I think that one of the core elements that's being kind of missed here as well is that much of a photograph for the subject, especially if they're buying it, so if the subject is the person buying it, much of the value of that photograph is the memory of that image being taken as it is the final image. And I like modern photographers today totally forget that, right? Because it's just like, fucking hell, we got 3 hours. It's just, if I can get as many images as possible, I can get more money. And yeah, like, I get it. But, if you're making, these individual shots, like the memory of those shots being taken, I used to do family portraits and that sort of thing long time ago. And I used to play a game where, it would be mum, dad, and 2 kids, and it'd be split into 2 teams, right? So mum and kid on one side, dad and kid on the other side, and I get them to push into each other, right? So dad is pushing this way, mum's pushing that way, and the kids getting into it. They're trying to tickle dad, they're trying to cheat and all that sort of stuff, and they're playing games and like, oh, and then Susan fell over and like, we won. That is not a flattering image. the faces are all squished up. They're not even looking at you. He's got his eyes closed. I would sell that image every single time because it wasn't about the final image. It was about the memory of that image being taken and the fun that they had playing that game during the image being taken. That is what sells most images, which I think is lost a lot, again, in modern photography, where it's just a volume, right? I can just give you more images. You'll see more value in that. And it's not. If the person is buying the image and they're in the image, you got to make sure that when that image was taken, that it's memorable.
Exactly. There was a really interesting quote by Yngwie Malmsteen, one of the fastest guitarists alive, right? Where he was asked, like, "Oh, well, surely, why do you play so many notes? Surely, less is more." And he goes, like, "Well, no, more is more. More is more, isn't it? Like, more is more."
Yeah.
And it's like, you go, like, well, there's a fundamental misunderstanding, because I use the exact same principle when it comes to headshots. And again, something, if you're an avid listener of this podcast, I've talked about this many times, but basically, so my philosophy when it comes to headshots, for example, no matter whether it's actors headshots or or corporate headshots, for example, is really that I don't do 20-minute headshot sessions. And the reason why I don't do that is because the end result is not what's important. It's just like you say, it's the experience, and in 20 minutes, my client is not going to have the same experience that they would have in an hour or even in 2 hours, because I do unlimited sessions. So I don't really care however much time they give me. We produce some really awesome imagery. We can go through loads of different things and whatever. But the reason why I don't charge 60 quid for a headshot is because, to me, the experience, and my clients agree with that, obviously, is that the experience of creating that final image, not only is the final image going to be a lot better, that's one thing, but it's the experience that's where the value is. Having that experience, because without fail, every single person that comes through my door will utter the same few words on the way through the door. Now, well, I don't want to be here, or I've never liked having my phone.
I look terrible in photos. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. They always say the same thing.
Always.
And if I can give them the experience that by the time they leave, they go, "I had a really good time. I really enjoyed it." Now that's the magic, and that's
you are going to sell. You're going to sell images. Yeah.
Exactly. That's where the value is. And that, to me as a photographer, is much more satisfying than just going, right, 20 minutes, time's up, next, here you go,
yeah,
whatever shit we've just shot.
I took 200 images though, so,
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, imagine in 20 minutes, you can shoot hundreds of images. It's not about the volume of the images. Yeah. And I don't deliver. So this is the other thing I don't do, as compared to many other headshot photographers. I do not deliver. I won't do digital gallery, online galleries, and I won't deliver lots of shots. I'll deliver a very select few of retouched images, and that is it. So there's no such thing as like, oh, we're going to look through lots of the straight out of camera files and decide in a week from now which one we want. It's like, no, we're going to sit down at the end of the session. We're going to go through them. We're going to find the hero shot, the one that you love the most, of every setup that we've done, and then those are the ones that I'm going to retouch, and that's it. And so what you're going to end up with is however many images you choose, 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever. But these are the images that are the cream of the crop. Those are the ones that will remind you of the experience that you had when you did that session with me. And to me, that's important. To other people, they might think, well, it's a giant waste of time, because you could have 4 clients in at the same time. Fine. If that's the volume game you want to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Totally. And of course, I have these calls, people go, look, I just need one headshot, there's a guy who does it for like 80 quid. I'm like, yeah, fine. I mean, totally cool. I actually know a guy who does it for 60 quid. I'll give you his number. Like, absolutely no problem. Yeah. Why? I wouldn't want to do that. There's no point in me doing that, because I just don't want to do it. I do, however, caveat that by saying that, the photographer with the biggest house on Malibu Beach is going to be the guy who has his photo booths in every superstore and supermarket around town.
True.
So that's the thing.
Yeah.
Jake, if you had to give a new photographer, or somebody who wants to get into creative studio lighting, if you had to give them one tip, what would it be?
I think you've got to shoot way more than you think you've got to shoot. I think that the old adage of 1,000 travel books isn't worth one actual trip is very true. And I think that in an age where we have kind of almost infinite access to education and skills and TikToks and all that crap, I think that it's really about you getting in the studio, or setting up a studio at home, setting up a studio in your bedroom, or whatever it is, and don't let space hold you back, because you can do a huge amount in a small amount of space. And in fact, those restrictions will actually make you a better photographer in the long run. But I think you just got to be shooting way more than you think. It's not just good enough to be watching 10 YouTube videos a week. It's just not it. It's just not going to hold water. You need to start building up your visual language. You need to start getting used to your equipment, all these sorts of things. That camera needs to be an extension of your arm, really. And you need to be in a mindset where you're like getting used to your kit, your lights in your space, your camera. And I think that that is, I'm very fortunate. I worked in a very busy studio for many, many, many years. I did my 10,000 hours, and there is no substitute for that. I don't care how many YouTube videos you think you need to watch. There is no substitute for that. You just got to shoot, and then you just got to shoot some more.
So what's coming up for you? What's next for you?
Without blowing my own trumpet, I do have an exhibition in Paris next week that I'm going out to see. So that'll be good. So something that was kind of wild that happens, kind of getting that signed off and okayed last year, but finally it's happening. So yeah, I'll be going out to Paris next Tuesday. Go out there. It's going to be like a bunch of my images are going to be exhibited on the side of a building in Paris, which is kind of wild. So I'll go out and do that. Which is nuts. So yeah, that's certainly something that I never thought would happen. Like, it's like, art is art, and I'm not somebody that does it for the likes. But I mean, that's certainly having your images up in lights literally is food for the soul, for sure. So that'd be cool. Other than that, though, yeah, I got a shoot on Sunday, and then a couple of bits next month. It should be an interesting shoot next month. A lot of color and very interesting old London bar type strip club thing. So that should be cool. And then yeah, so I mean, I kind of mentioned it, and forgive the blatant plug here, but I do a lot of online education with a bunch of people. So a lot of mentoring and online education with people all over the world, and I have done for many years. It kind of started during COVID, and then people just kept asking for it after COVID, so I kind of carried it on. So I do a lot of online workshops and training, and that all of that is one-to-one, right? So it's kind of targeted to your skill set, your skill level, and your equipment. Like, you're shooting strobes, you're shooting speed lights, you're shooting LEDs, so all of it is kind of targeted to your needs as well. So that's kind of keeping me busy, and I love doing that. It's fascinating. We live in this amazing age where we can kind of talk to anybody, from. And I mean, I've done these sessions with people from all over the world, and it's kind of fascinating to see the business of the photographic businesses that they have, and like the kind of struggles that they're going through in their region, and that sort of thing. I find that whole thing fascinating, right? Because we're all on our own journey, like we're all making our own way with it. Like I said, photographers are lone wolves. We do have to kind of make our own kind of way through this. I know years ago people used to say, "Oh, I'm self-taught," but like we're all self-taught. Like you're all self-taught. So it is. A fascinating part of the job that I have now is kind of engaging with those people and seeing how they're dealing with the problems that they're dealing with, in their studios and businesses. Yeah, it's been good, man. It's been cool. Yeah.
And of course, if people want to find out about that, all they have to do is go to your website, the link of which is going to be in the description of this episode. So no matter whether you're listening on audio or you're joining us on YouTube, check out all the links to Jake's socials and website in the description.
It's pretty
below.
much Google Jake Hicks Photography and it'll come up. But yeah, jakehicksphotography.com is the website. And then, yeah, if you're interested in kind of getting, feedback and community-wise, we do have a great, very colorful community on my Facebook page. I know it seems old school, but Facebook just still seems to be one of the best ways to actually kind of communicate with people rather than just the emojis of Instagram.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's the same thing like with the Camera Shake Facebook community. It's a similar thing.
Cool.
It's just an easy way to do it.
It is.
Cool. Jake, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show again. Let's not make it 2 more years.
I know. I apologize for all the rants that I went through. I promised myself, like, don't rant, Jake. Don't get into nerdy rants. And yeah, it happened. So I apologize. But yeah, hopefully there was a nugget in there that you can use.
No apologies needed. That's really where where the fun is in this podcast. Of course, it's the never-ending ranting. I know I'm known for that. Anyway, Jake, thank you so much. All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. It was awesome having Jake on the show again. But before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 215 with Gavin Hoey. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy the content, then consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us keep bringing you amazing episodes. I have no idea why I keep saying us because it's really just me. It really means the world to me. And for those of you listening on audio, did you know that there's a fully fleshed out video version of this podcast over on YouTube? Well, you should by now because I keep mentioning it all the time. You get to see all of our guests' stunning photography in full Technicolor. So just head over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you can watch all of our past episodes there. And if you're already on there, well, be sure to drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach more people across the globe. So thanks again for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday. So make sure you mark that in your calendars, diaries, whatever your kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.